The silent treatment is easy to miss in the moment because it doesn't look like open conflict. There's no shouting, no clear accusation, no specific request. Instead, communication stops. Messages go unanswered, eye contact disappears, basic interaction becomes minimal or cold. What makes this pattern so impactful is the uncertainty it creates. When someone suddenly withdraws without explanation, the other person is left to interpret what happened and how to fix it. That ambiguity tends to pull people into repair mode, replaying conversations, searching for the mistake, and trying different approaches to restore normal contact. From a behavioral standpoint, this is part of why the tactic is effective. The person using silence doesn't have to argue, justify, or negotiate. They can apply pressure without stating a demand, while the other person does most of the emotional work to close the gap. And because it's framed as not doing anything, it can be difficult to describe or challenge. On the surface, it looks passive. In practice, when it's used as punishment, it functions as a form of social exclusion. Connection is withheld until the other person changes their behavior. In other words, the silence isn't the absence of communication, it becomes the message. A practical way to define the silent treatment is a deliberate refusal to communicate or acknowledge someone in response to conflict. The key difference is intent and structure. In many relationships, taking a break is normal. Someone may step away to calm down, prevent escalation, or think clearly. In those cases, the break is typically communicated, time-limited, and followed by re-engagement. Punitive silence has a different profile. Communication is withheld without a clear plan to return, and the withdrawal functions as a consequence for the other person's behavior. Instead of addressing the disagreement directly, the person uses non-response, ignoring texts minimally, replies, refusing conversation, acting as if the other person is not present, to create social and emotional pressure. This approach shifts the dynamic of the conflict. Rather than discussing the original issue, attention moves to restoring contact. The receiving person is often placed in a position of uncertainty, which increases attempts to repair, explain, or comply, sometimes without any explicit request being made. In that sense, punishment-based silence operates as a form of interpersonal control. Access to normal connection is withheld until the other person changes course. When the silent treatment is used as punishment, it usually serves one or more clear functions. These motives can overlap, but they tend to fall into a few common categories. 1. Behavioral control. Withholding communication can push the other person toward a desired outcome, dropping a complaint, retracting a boundary, apologizing, agreeing, or acting right. It works because it creates an immediate cost for disagreement, disconnection. 2. Power and status. Silence can establish a hierarchy. The person who withdraws positions themselves as the one who decides when interaction resumes. This can reinforce a dynamic where one person's comfort and preferences dominate the relationship. 3. Punishment without confrontation. Instead of arguing or explaining, silence allows someone to impose consequences while avoiding direct conflict. This is useful for people who want impact without discussion, or who want to punish while still appearing calm. 4. Avoiding accountability. If the conversation continues, they may have to answer questions, acknowledge harm, or negotiate. Withdrawal prevents that. The focus shifts from their behavior to the other person's response. 5. Emotion regulation through distance. In some cases, the motive is not dominance, but relief. Silence reduces emotional intensity quickly. However, when the pattern is repeated and used strategically, it still functions as a controlling tactic regardless of the internal justification. These motives explain why silence is chosen. It is low effort, high impact, and often shifts the relationship in the direction the silent person prefers. Beyond external outcomes, like getting someone to apologize, punitive silence often provides internal psychological rewards. These payoffs help explain why the behavior can become a stable habit. Reduced vulnerability. Conversation requires exposure. You can be questioned, contradicted, or shown to be wrong. Silence removes that risk. It creates distance from emotions like shame, embarrassment, or insecurity. Perceived emotional control. Withholding communication can create a feeling of composure and superiority. Even if the person is emotionally activated, silence can be used to maintain an image of being unaffected or above it, a sense of dominance and certainty. When the other person becomes anxious, explains themselves, or tries to repair, the connection, it confirms influence. That response can be interpreted, consciously or not, as proof of importance, authority, or leverage. Avoidance of complex repair. Repair requires empathy, listening, and compromise. Silence bypasses those skills. The relationship resumes when the silent person feels satisfied, not necessarily when the issue is resolved. Preservation of a preferred self-image. For individuals with strong needs to appear right, respected, or untouchable, silence can function as a defense. Instead of engaging with feedback, they withdraw and let the other person carry the uncertainty. Taken together, these rewards make the silent treatment a high reinforcement strategy. It protects the person internally while often producing compliance externally. The silent treatment is effective because it targets predictable human responses to social disconnection. Most people are wired to treat relationship rupture as urgent, even when there is no immediate physical threat. Uncertainty increases effort. When communication stops without explanation, the brain tries to reduce ambiguity. That typically leads to increased analysis. What did I say? And increased outreach. Let me fix this, because restoring predictability feels like solving the problem. Social exclusion triggers stress responses. Being ignored activates threat-related systems associated with belonging and safety. Even brief exclusion can increase distress, rumination, and sensitivity to cues of rejection. In close relationships, the impact is amplified because the person matters more. The repair reflex shifts responsibility. People often assume that reconnection requires them to do something. Apologize, soften their stance, offer reassurance, especially if they fear loss. This can move the relationship toward appeasement even when the original issue was legitimate. Intermittent reinforcement strengthens attachment. If the silent person returns unpredictably, warm one moment, withdrawn the next, the uncertainty can increase the receiving person's focus and investment. The return of contact feels like relief, which reinforces the cycle. These mechanisms don't mean the receiving person is weak. They explain why silence can reliably produce self-doubt and compliance, especially when it becomes a repeated pattern. Punitive silence is most likely to appear at moments where the silent person experiences a threat to control, status, or self-image. The trigger is often less about the topic itself and more about what the interaction implies. Common triggers include: a boundary is set. The other person says no, asks for respect, requests change, or limits access. Accountability is introduced. The other person points out inconsistency, broken promises, disrespect, or harm. Admiration decreases. The other person stops praising, stops chasing, or becomes more independent. A challenge occurs publicly or privately. Even mild disagreement can be interpreted as disrespect, loss of advantage. If the other person gains clarity, support, or leverage, friends, therapy, financial independence, withdrawal can be used to reestablish control. In these situations, silence functions as a quick way to shift the power balance. It interrupts the discussion and makes reconnection the priority. Over time, the receiving person may start avoiding these trigger topics, which is part of how the dynamic becomes entrenched. When the silent treatment is used as punishment, it often follows a repeatable sequence that resembles behavior conditioning. The pattern doesn't require explicit threats. It works through predictable cause and effect. Step 1. A boundary, request, or disagreement happens. The receiving person expresses a need, says no, or challenges something. Step 2. Communication is withdrawn. The silent person reduces contact, refuses engagement, becomes cold, or acts as if the other person is not present. No clear time. Frame is provided. Step 3. The receiving person escalates repair efforts. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable, the receiving person often increases messaging, apologizes, over-explains, retracts their point, or tries to prove they are safe and agreeable. Step 4. The silent person re-engages on their terms. Contact returns when the silent person is satisfied, often after the receiving person has softened, conceded, or shifted focus away from the original issue. Step 5. The lesson is learned. The receiving person begins to associate honesty or boundaries with relational loss. To avoid the withdrawal, they self-censor, manage the other person's moods, and preemptively comply. Over time, this creates a stable system. The silent person doesn't need to negotiate because the relationship learns to organize itself around their comfort. The original issues remain unresolved, but the behavior pattern becomes stronger because it reliably produces short-term outcomes. When silence is used as punishment, it's not simply poor communication. It's a strategy that changes the incentives inside the relationship. It teaches one person that expressing needs leads to withdrawal, and it teaches the other person that withdrawal produces control. The most useful reframe is to treat the silent treatment as information, not about your worth, but about the role the other person wants you to play. If the pattern is, you speak up, they disappear, you chase, they return, then the goal is not resolution. The goal is compliance. Breaking the spell starts with naming the function accurately. Not they're quiet, but connection is being withheld to create pressure. Once the function is clear, it becomes easier to respond strategically by not rewarding the cycle and by deciding what level of communication is required for a relationship to stay healthy.